In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
It is 100% real. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Curious Dimension podcast. I am your host, Matt Barone. I hope everybody has been enjoying the content and the shows. If you do have a second, please hit that like button, that subscribe button, and leave a comment at the end of the video. I'd love to hear what you think. It really helps out the show as well. It doesn't cost you anything. My guest today is Brit Elders. Brit is a prominent internationally published author who focuses her work on nonfiction topics. She's written books, articles, documentary films. She's also CEO of ShirleyMacLaine.com and an advocate for naturopathic health and healthy eating. She's also a UFO researcher known for her in-depth analysis of the Billy Meier contact case. This case involves Swiss contactee Billy Meier, who claims to have been in communication with extraterrestrials, known as the Plejaren or Pleiadians, since the 1940s. Brit brings a critical yet open-minded approach to her research, exploring the complex details of Meier's encounters, evidence, and the broader implications for our understanding of UFO phenomena. Her work aims to shed light on one of the most controversial and intriguing contact cases in UFO history. This is a very controversial case, mostly because of how clear the photos are that Mr. Meier was able to obtain. And we get into some of that in the podcast on how he was able to obtain these photos. We also show multiple photos and video that he was able to get of the clearest pictures of UFOs I've ever seen. And in my opinion, that's why there is a tremendous amount of pushback on this particular case. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. This is a fantastic one. Without further ado, here's Brit Elders. Okay, Brit, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good. It's very nice to meet you.
It's good to meet you, too. We've had some brief but good conversations.
Yes, absolutely. What I want to do today, Brit, if it's okay with you, is maybe we could start and you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this particular case, which is extraordinary. And then maybe we could go into a little bit of the photos and some of the evidence. And then towards the end, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about disclosure and how this case certainly affects that. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with this particular case.
I'm a writer, basically. I've been writing since I was 8 years old, and I did one novel, and that was it. And after that, I decided everything had to be real, nonfiction. So that's where my focus has always been. I've written books for myself, for others, edited books, done documentary films, a lot of different things in my background, as well as investigation. My husband, Lee, and I had a company called Intercept. And Intercept was designed to prevent big banks, Fortune 500s, from going through the issues of being wiretapped or eavesdropped on. So we had a background in investigation. A friend of ours, Colonel Wendell Stevens, brought some photographs to us and said, "You got to see these. They're incredible." And we went, "Yeah, they're too good to be true." They were just too perfect. This is back in 1975. And so we said, "No, we're not interested." And he kept saying, "But you have the investigative chops and knowledge. You need to get in there and do this." And we kept backing off. That was until we had a client in London. And then we went over to London, decided to take a day trip to Switzerland, where we figured we'd figure out how he was doing this just in a very short period of time. That didn't happen. We were there 5 days, spent all 5 days with Billy. He was very generous, very gracious, showed us everything we wanted to see, allowed us free range through his house and his property. Anything we wanted to look into, we could. There were no restrictions whatsoever. And then before we left, which was 5 days later, he gave us metal samples,
Mm-hmm.
He gave us movie footage, still photographs, and audio recordings of the craft. And we had already interviewed about 24 witnesses or so at that point.
This is trip one.
And this is trip one.
My God. Okay. Keep
Yeah.
going.
So he said, this is yours. It's for you. Take it back to the States, have it analyzed, and let me know what you find. That was his attitude.
Wow.
We did. We brought it back to the States. We began what ended up being a 7-year investigation of just reaching out to anyone who had the knowledge, the background, the education, and the equipment to properly analyze these things. We were in laboratories like, oh gosh, USGS. We were at JPL. We were at U of A, University of Arizona with Dr. Michael Malin, IBM Laboratories, Scripps Institute, Ames Research. It was really remarkable. And it just, every time we thought we had an answer, no, we had 50 more questions. So it was something that was perpetual, that we just kept moving forward. Because you have to go back in time. This was when people didn't have phones that took great photographs and movie footage. They didn't have personal computers. None of that was there at everyone's disposal. So how would this farmer with a 6th grade education, basically, worldly, knowledgeable because he had traveled through the Middle East and through Europe, but not educated, how would he know to put things like thulium, which is a rare earth metal, into the metal samples we were given? How could he manipulate images? It was something that took us all over the place. And we did a lot of work and learned a lot and met a lot of fantastic people. The interesting thing was none of them would say, this is a UFO. They would say, we can tell you we can't duplicate it, but we don't know what it is. Okay.
Yes. And one of the things that I found interesting in your research was a lot of them, when I say them, these people doing photo analysis on the photographs, they were clear that there was a 3-dimensional object hovering in whatever position the particular photo was. And just for the record, how many photos did Billy Meier take?
Over 1,000.
Right. So we're talking about a lot of photos. Now several of those were stolen. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
But still a substantial
Billy
amount.
was very trusting. In the beginning, he trusted everyone, and they would come in and say, oh, let me take this picture and I'll go have a copy made and I'll bring the original back. And they didn't.
Never came back.
So, yeah.
But still a substantial amount of photographs did survive probably those early rocky years of deception and people just being untruthful. And a lot of those researchers, people doing photo analysis on those photos, they did confirm that there was a 3-dimensional object there and that it had depth and whatever it was there, something was there, right? And so once you get
from the camera, yes.
Yes. And once you get to that point, then you're looking at the object itself, which is hyper clear. Right. And then you have to say, all right, that thing is there. What are we talking about here? And maybe we should just go ahead and put up a picture so everyone can see what it is we're talking about here. Let's start with the one that's on the cover of your book.
Oh, okay.
Because this photo
we
to
call
me,
that the sunlight scene.
Yes. Let me know. Can you see this now?
No, but I haven't. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay. All right. So can you talk to me a little bit about this photo and why is this? It's impressive, but can you explain to me and talk to me about this photo?
It is remarkable. We call it the sunlight scene for obvious reasons. It was one of a series that was taken at a very short period of time on the same day. It's at a place called Hassenbol. Hassenbol is one of the windiest, coldest hills I have ever been on in my life. It was blowing no matter when we were up there looking at it. And the whole great thing about this photograph is when we had it digitized, where we could look at the tree and the object behind it. The object was behind the tree. there was a branch, and you can see it.
Mm.
It goes up along, and then it bisects the craft.
Mm.
And you see it when it's digitized, especially. But we had the distance to the tree from the camera, so we could look at this. We knew the height of the tree, and therefore we could triangulate and determine the size of this craft,
Mm.
which was 21 feet in diameter.
And then through further photo analysis, they determined that this was a 3D object. So
Yes.
nobody's standing on that tree hanging this thing. There's something there, right? And so this is what I find very interesting about this case, because when you Google this case, you just get inundated with people espousing that it's fake, this is all BS,
Right.
without really looking at the data. And that's something that you and Lee with your Intercept Corporation did. It seemed like you guys approached this skeptically and then did a lot of hard data and then just presented that to people and say, what do you think? And
That you do with an investigation. It doesn't matter if it's murder one, counterespionage, or a UFO case. You follow the same criteria of investigation. You uncover evidence. You have to be neutral. My personal opinions, I can keep separate from whatever we're analyzing or having analyzed in this case. And so you just start compiling data. And the data continually pointed to the fact that this indicated something was definitely going on with Mr. Meier, something that he claimed when he said he had contacts with extraterrestrial beings. It supports his claims.
right. And can we talk a little bit about the sun reflection here off this particular object? I'm going to call it a beam ship because that's what he called it. Can we talk about that for a second and how that leads to a little bit of credibility here?
Yeah, the reflection from the setting sun was really interesting because there's only 3 pictures where it really picked up that. The rest of the time you see a little glint, but nothing like this. This indicates a metal object, according to the scientists that we were talking to. That's the only thing other than glass that would reflect light like that. It also gives a perception of depth. From the top of the craft to the bottom of the craft, you can see how the light has refracted across it. Underneath, and the position of the sun was absolutely perfect when you align the shadows and everything in the other photographs in this series, that the sunlight is absolutely perfect across that craft and then through the rest of the shadows in the entire series.
Wow. Amazing. Let's pull up a different photo. I want to take a look at another one here. Let's look at this one here because this one is right by some trees as well. So let me know when you can see that.
The tree line scene. Yeah. This is a great image because this is a variation 2 craft. Over the period of years, the Pleiadians brought in different types of craft that had different basis of operations. Not base as in a physical base, but the way it operated and what it was designed to do. This particular craft was one of the first that we had analyzed. And when we began, we had the image digitized. And then from having it digitized, we could look and count the pixels to determine, is it a very small object or is it a large object? And you do that by comparing that to the tree. We knew the size of the tree, the height of it. We knew how far it was from the camera. So we could compare. And in that comparison, again, we came up with 21 feet in diameter. The other thing that's great about this image is looking at it, and I've walked that site many times, where it's hovering right above that little tree there. There is no way that an object could have been suspended. That little tree is taller than I am. And at the time, and I'm a hair under 6 foot. So yeah, that was something that kind of went, wow, okay.
Right. Let me ask you a question. When you first meet Billy, you said he was very generous. He was opened his home to you. What was your impression of just him, like straight away when you walked in there? What did you think about him?
I have to paint him in the word earthy. Definitely a farmer. Loved the land, loved all the critters on the land and growing things. Open, receptive, not at all apparently hiding anything. He backed away if we said, "Are you hiding something?" He'd say, "Oh no, go look. Whatever
Right.
you want, open drawers, look through things." There was nothing that indicated any type of deception or any manipulation of any kind. Not really quiet, but reserved in
Mhm.
his speech. If you asked a question, you got an answer. If he didn't know, he said, "I don't know,"
Mhm.
and left it at that, which was good because you don't expect everyone to always have all of the answers.
Mhm.
And there were many things he said, "I'm not sure. I don't know. I would have to ask." So
And
that was an interesting aspect.
yes, yeah, interesting. That lends an interesting point to the whole case. Could you reiterate about what year most of these were taken? In sometime in the mid 70s.
75 and 76, the majority of the photographs were taken, yes.
Okay. And he doesn't just have photographs. He had 8mm video footage. Is that correct? Okay. I think
That's right.
I.
Do you have one of the clips there?
Yeah, I'd love to pull that up. Let me see if I can find the video. I think this is it here. Let me know when you can see this.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is 8mm.
This is one of my favorites. It is an 8mm movie footage segment like our parents used to have and took pictures of family members and things like that. Billy didn't have any digital equipment whatsoever. This was just in 35. Underneath, you can just see a car passing on a road
Mhm.
as that craft is there. And then the craft blinks out, blinks in. There's no time lost. There's the car.
Yep.
It's a very busy highway, and it's a wonderful piece of footage to have analyzed. There were no edits in this footage. When we got the strips of footage, it was just frame by frame by frame. So that was something that was very interesting to us.
Mm.
Now, the wobbling, the Palladians told Billy, is caused by the magnetic field of the Earth.
Mm.
And the craft literally rides the waves of the magnetics of the Earth.
And so obviously these photos are amazing. That video footage is amazing. I'd love for maybe you to maybe reiterate what Billy has said about why he was able to get these amazing photos and video, because you're not just in the right place at the right time. Something's going on here. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that, which I'm sure is pretty in depth, but
Yes. What happened was the Palladians told Billy that they had past lives together. So there was a reincarnation pattern that they recognized in him. They studied him for a full 10 years before they initiated contact. They wanted to make certain that he was capable and willing to have a face-to-face contact, not be afraid of the repercussions, and could do what they asked, which was to take a message to the world and say, "You're not the only thinking beings in the universe."
mm,
That was the primary goal. So after they watched him for these 10 years, Billy had no idea this was going on. He was sitting at his kitchen table, got a cooling sensation across his forehead, and decided something's different. So he got up and he had this impulse to get on his moped and to head out into the forest. He followed the instructions he was hearing in his head, wondering, what are these things? Why am I going here? Ended up at a very remote area in the forest, no houses around, no farms around, just a big open field. And he heard a sound. He had never heard anything like it before. He looked up and he saw this object in the sky. It slowly settled down. As it did, and it eventually landed, the sound subsided, and from behind the craft came a woman. She was tall, blonde, blue-eyed. The unusual thing that Billy noticed right off was her earlobes came right into her jawline. She introduced herself as Simyasa, said she was from a star system we call the Pleiades, and began a conversation. And they sat under a tree and talked for several hours, and then she left. Her goal was to tell him, you've got to let the people know, and we will supply the evidence to support what you're saying, but you've got to let them know they are not the only thinking beings in the universe. Because at that time, we were still really into the space race and all of the things going on then. They knew we would be heading into space, but we haven't learned how to deal with our own issues on this planet yet. And yet we want to go into space. And they were very concerned about that.
Yes. Yeah, obviously in the 70s, we're sending Voyager out there and we've already been to the moon at that point.
We had Soyuz and Apollo missions. We had joint missions, separate missions. Everybody was trying to really get out there and do something, make a mark.
And so when they're telling him they're going to supply him with these amazing, obviously they're going to let him take these photos. The photos are so good. That's the biggest problem that I see with the case, because every time I'm on social media a little bit, and there's a lot of these groups out there, and they're constantly posting like fuzzy lights in the sky or orbs, which are interesting, but you don't really know what it is you're looking at. And so when you get something that's so in your face and so graphic, it's almost like you have this cognitive dissonance and your brain won't accept it. And I think I may have mentioned this to you on our previous conversation when Danny Sheehan was on a podcast and he was describing things that would be coming out into the public domain. And his point was, how graphic does it need to be? What do you need to know to understand that there's something really going on here? And in 1970, when these photos are taken, the stigmatism was even more hard-boiled back then. Nobody probably had any clue. The majority of the people were living their lives, but now it almost seems like this is an appropriate time to resurface this material. Let me ask you this question. And this leads into disclosure, which is a hot topic right now, and it does seem like it's picking up steam. We always hear that there's better photos going to come out, more evidence. Could the photos that are in his catalog be part of that collection that the government's holding on to, that they know is possibly real, and along with other things that they would have?
It is possible, because for several reasons. One of them is we did a lot of work at different government labs when we were having the things analyzed that are attached to this case. We were at the Groton Naval Facility having the audio recordings analyzed. JPL, you don't get much more government than that. All of these different places that we went to, and our agreement was very simple with them. You give us an honest analysis, and you use the information you get any way fit. That was fine with us. Everybody gains that way. And so it was a fair exchange, we felt. Nothing that said, oh, we're going to take this and run with it. And we never let the evidence out of our sight. It was with us all the time, because we knew how easy it would be to manipulate it or to have it disappear. And we learned that lesson the hard way, because Marcel Vogel had a piece of metal and was going to a meeting, and he said it disappeared out of his pocket. And we never saw that piece of metal again. So we learned the hard way, and after that, we were with it all the way through.
Can we talk about the metallurgy for a little bit? Because I know you guys did analyzation on pieces of metals that were given to him, and then he gave them to you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The metal, Billy told us, was from the skin of the craft, and it was different stages of development of the skin of the craft. When you looked at it, it looked like it could have been a piece of solder. It wasn't anything special. It was very small, about the size. One was maybe the size of an eraser on a pencil, but still small. Others were smaller than BBs, granules. When we took it to Marcel Vogel and he sat down and analyzed it, one of the things he noticed was that the metal was pure, separated by crystalline. And that crystalline structure separation was very unusual. And it was a cold fusion process of putting the metal together. It was not like we did back then, heated and poured, which was the only way we knew how to form metal, was to heat it and pour it. We're just now really getting into the cold fusion aspects of what you can do with metal. Here we have this crystalline structure stuck between chunks of metal. And then on top of all of it, we have a rare earth element, thulium, which is extremely costly to extract and difficult to find. How do you get that? You're left shaking your head all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, now what do I do with this?
It's unlikely that a farmer living in Schibidruti, is that where he lived in Switzerland?
Rudy?
And very rural part of the country would have these things. It's just, yeah, I mean, you start to rack your brain on it and then you start to think, what are we arguing about here? I mean, something strange is happening. This guy is certainly at the center of it. And it's just, I find that it's a shame that people will look at this material and then immediately take the standpoint that it couldn't possibly be real. I think that when you're approaching this, like you said, you have to approach it with an open mind, some skepticism, and then just see where the data leaves you.
That's right. It's really important to do it that way. But you have to look back at our past and our initial reaction when we saw the photographs and went, oh my God, they're just too good to be true. That's your first reaction. The second issue there is that it's a contact case. Contact cases are not well accepted, especially among the community. Abduction cases, absolutely. But an ongoing repetitive contact case is not something they're accustomed to. Fortunately, we didn't have a big background in UFOs, so we didn't know any of this stuff. And we basically couldn't figure out the difference between, okay, Betty and Barney Hill were abducted, Travis Walton was abducted, Billy had a contact. It was a willing thing with him. He made that choice to go ahead and continue the meetings with Semyasa, to take in the evidence and to do something with it. All of it just was new and different to us. Everybody at that point in time was whispering the word UFO, but no one would say it. You definitely didn't go someplace and have a discussion about UFOs because people thought you were running around and you lost your marbles. This is not something you do. We were hesitant because we didn't want to risk our reputation. But in the end, I think it was worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you guys did a lot of heavy lifting with that. So when you went over there, let's backtrack for a second. How did you guys meet Wendell Stevens? Because was he the first to go over there and meet him and suss him out?
He was one of the very first investigators to go over. He was definitely the first in our team. Wendell was an old friend. He and Lee had been to Ecuador. Lee had several digs going down in Ecuador, and he was working with the Shuar Indians down there. Wendell decided he wanted to take a ride with him and go down and spend some time in the jungle. So that's how they got to know each other. And this was back in the 60s, late 60s.
Wow.
And then in 72, they went to Ecuador together. And then this all happened in 75. Yeah.
And Wendell said, hey, you guys have this company. Maybe would you be interested in basically you guys finance this investigation, right?
Our own pocket. Yeah.
And I find it interesting.
Company. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you talk about, was there any animosity between some of the UFO groups that were out there that you guys were doing this privately because they wanted their hands on it?
I could understand that. It was frustrating because they didn't get what they wanted sometimes, and then they go on the attack. And that was irritating, but it was a gnat compared to some other things that were happening. But yeah, they wanted, because they were a UFO group, and they had this background of knowledge. They
Mm.
wanted us to turn over the documentation to them, all the evidence, and we said no.
Mm.
We just weren't going to do it. We made a lot of people mad.
But you would also think, I understand where they're coming from, but you would also think you have this private group that can do excellent work, can do things that maybe, quite frankly, maybe they couldn't have done at the time. And so you get maybe better results, better information. And that's ultimately what this should be about, right? I understand everybody needs to
Agree.
make money and make a living, but we're talking about something that is paradigm shifting, globally
Yes,
changing. And you would think that should be the ultimate goal, right?
I
Um,
agree. It's very important because, but at the time, it was different. And you got to step back in that time frame. It was, we know UFOs, you don't. Well,
mm,
we weren't looking at it as a UFO case. We were looking at it from an investigative standpoint of, okay, we've got this. What do we do with it? And that's how we approached it. That made a big difference for us. My husband could be very stubborn and
mm,
didn't mind ruffling feathers and
mm.
was first to say, no, there's no reason for you to have it. Do you have a scanning electron microscope? Do you have the capabilities to digitize any of these images? He just attacked, and they attacked back. But yeah,
But he was
I
right.
can get it.
But ultimately, he was right. And you guys put the information out. They could have looked at the information as, I mean, you guys didn't hide anything. You made a documentary about it.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and so the information was out there. Um, yeah, this is an absolutely fascinating case. Maybe we can move into a little bit about some of what the information that was given to Billy, because we're talking about contacts that spanned, I don't know how many years, but it was
Still going on.
it's still going on. And we should probably tell everybody that Billy is still alive. He's
Yes, he
living in
is.
Switzerland and the contacts are ongoing. And so he's getting information. And then how does he disseminate his information? Does he have a website? Does he?
It is up on the internet. The contact notes are available on the internet, but he's not pushing it at all. If you want to go
Mm,
search for it, you can find it. It's that kind of thing.
mhm,
His meetings are face to face. The Palladians told him back in the 70s when Billy would say, "Can I have some more pictures? Can I have some more metal?" They finally said, "How much do you need?
exactly.
Where do you draw the line?" They cut it off. So everything has either been through just a face-to-face communication or telepathy and in their discussions. But what Billy does is after contact, he goes back to his office and he writes out what they discussed, who said what, and all of that. And that is the basis of the contact notes that are available online. They're not, some of them are really profound and beautiful. Some
Mhm,
of them are very mundane.
mm,
Your farm needs this, or you need to do that, or yeah, it's very personal and doesn't have any bearing on anything. But other parts of the contact notes are beautiful. They talk about how we need to develop as humans, how we
mm,
need to care for each other as well as ourselves on a whole different level. They
mm,
say we are imbalanced because we have a technical side which is growing so rapidly
mm,
and a spiritual side which is not.
mhm,
And the two have got to be equal and come together so we can get ourselves to a position of being capable of getting into space and communicating with other beings out there. They also had a very big message when it came to who we all really are. They
mm,
say we were seeded by extraterrestrial beings, our planet was, different organizations, not just the Palladians, but others as well. And
mm,
that they look at us as their little brothers and sisters, and they
mm,
feel a need to care for us, watch over us, but not interfere with our development or growth.
mm. And we know now from the James Webb Telescope that we have star systems out there and galaxies out there that are far older than ours. And so it's not hard to extrapolate that if a star system had intelligent life and it developed a long time ago that they could have escaped velocity and achieved these different benchmarks throughout their history and learned how to manipulate physics to traverse long distances quite easily. Did they mention how far ahead they were?
Yeah, about 3,000 years.
Mm,
300 to 3,000 years. The big thing that I think I've got to bring up here, because the Pleiades is a young star system,
mm,
and it's pretty close to us. It's only 400 light years away. But the Pleiadian people did not originate in the Pleiades. They
mm,
originated in the system of Lyra. Their planet was very much like ours, which is why they have some compassion for us. It was a very divided planet. It was a warring planet, constantly battling. And they ended up destroying that planet. The difference was that those beings could escape. They had the technology to escape and to go to a new planet, engineer it so they could live there, and then create a civilization on that planet that they engineered. We
mm,
don't have those capabilities. And they're very concerned that we continue this fighting aspect among ourselves.
mm,
We're not going to progress, and we could do the same thing, but we don't have the capabilities of escaping like they did.
mm. And so probably one of the big questions that people get all the time is why don't they just show up? And I'm always been curious about these universal laws of like, no interference, and you have to cultivate self-responsibility. You do that with children, right?
Yeah.
I've got young boys. You want them to be self-sufficient. You love them, but eventually they need to go out into the world and be self-sufficient and productive members of the society. If you take that view and you just expand it a little bit out into the cosmos, which we're doing now, you would want these little brothers and sisters to be responsible and understand that you're part of a bigger community. So from that standpoint, it makes sense. The timing of the contact and the message of the contact would be that in the 70s. That does line up there.
Yeah, it's important to think of us as the new kids around anyway. We're
Mm,
talking now about really getting into space, setting up bases on Mars, going further than that.
mm,
And yet we haven't mastered our own issues here. Are we going to take those issues out into space with us?
mm,
That's not a good thing for us or anyone else out there. And if they're looking at us as their little brothers, and sisters, I think they're hoping that we will get our act together and learn how to communicate better, how to try to understand each other and treat each other with respect.
mhm. And I'm sure you're familiar with the documented cases around nuclear missile silos
Yeah.
and nuclear power plants. If you're familiar with any of that documentation, you would clearly see that the messages they don't there's clearly an interest in that, but there's been incidents where they've taken things down, shut things down, and to me you can infer that they're saying maybe it's time to get rid of these things, or maybe you're getting a
Yeah.
little out of control with this type of thing. There's been records of UFOs flying over these nuclear missile silos. Robert Salas has come out and said this, and it's well documented. Do you think that there are multiple races here on the planet monitoring at this time? So is that something he's been told?
Yes. He was told back in 1975 that there were 105 groups, different civilizations visiting Earth. And when I asked him not too long ago, are there more now? He said, probably. He didn't know for sure, but he said,
Mhm.
probably.
And
Yeah.
you would
That's a
imagine
lot.
if yeah. And if you've been around for a very long time, like I said before, we know now that there's stars and galaxies that are much older than ours. So if you've been around a million years longer than us, let's just say, you've probably seen civilizations get to this point where their technology is booming and they're going to leave their planet soon. So you may have seen this play out maybe a couple times with some variations, of course, but you're probably aware. So this might be the most exciting time to observe a civilization going through these growth pains. So it doesn't it's hard to believe because we don't know that much about this, but it's not hard to believe if
It's
that's
not.
what's really
Yeah,
going on. It makes
it's very
sense.
true.
Yeah, why wouldn't you come here now and observe this? They have global communications. They have weapons of mass destruction. There's viruses out there. They've got an economic system which is flimsy. They've got a political system that's falling apart a little bit. And you've probably seen this. You're like, man, they're so close. Let's just see what happens.
I think that's true. And I think the other thing, and it's a quote, that they said that they would not interfere with us yet.
Hmm.
I think if we get to the point of self-destruction, they will. But they're watching us now like a child, just taking baby steps. And
Mhm.
they're wondering if we're actually going to get to our feet or are
Mhm.
we going to fall on our bum? It's one or the other. And which way are we going to go? And we're at that crossroads. We really need to make some decisions as to where we want to be as a population.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're familiar with Whitley Strieber.
Oh, very much so. I love him. He's a good guy.
He was at, I didn't go to Contact in the Desert. I wish I did, but he said something there. They released a clip on their social media. And he said something to like, I might butcher this, but he said something to the like of the contactees are the next step. It's no, now there's something out there. These people have extraordinary information. So what are we talking about here? If contact has already been made and we know more, then what is this sort of mental gymnastics we're doing to try and decipher, is it all real? Is it not real? Maybe the conversation needs to be elevated a little bit further.
It definitely has to be elevated further. I think part of it is it's like taking a Spanish class in
Mm.
school. You have Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we're there now. There's a lot of us still at that level 1. And then there's a lot of us that are in 4th year Spanish and we all want to learn more.
Mm.
That's what they're doing by piecemealing pieces out. I absolutely agree with Whitley. The time of contactees to step forward, let the information come out is now. I really think Billy's case was premature.
Mm.
We're looking at what, almost 50 years? Yeah, being out there, but people weren't ready for it. They
Mm-mm.
weren't ready to discuss it, be curious about it. When we originally released Contact from the Pleiades Volume 1, we sold the books out in no time, but those people wanted to know. And it was
Mm.
only a handful
Mm.
that wanted to know versus the ones that said, I don't believe that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just made a flat out statement. It's beginning to change. People are beginning to finally be curious. And
Mm.
I think that curiosity sparks creativity. You begin to question, think, discuss, disclose, put it all together for people. It's a big difference. Timing is everything, and I think it's beginning to shift.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the main reasons why I named this podcast The Curious Dimension, Stay Curious, because I
Yeah.
think that really that sparks STEM, science, technology, mathematics. That curiosity is that seed that
Yes.
human beings, like, it's almost like a superpower that human beings have, that once it gets a hold of you, it'll drive you to learn more and more. And that's ultimately going to push humanity forward, civilization forward. But I think it starts with that curiosity and wonder. And I think that's what this subject does more than anything. It gets you interested in things that you might not normally have been interested in. And I
Once
love
you're
that aspect.
interested in it, you're never out of it.
Yeah.
You get into this because it takes you in so many diverse directions
Mm.
that you go, wow, okay. And I can learn this and go study that and explore this. It just never ends. And
Yeah.
so the topic of UFOs, UAPs is wonderful because
Mm.
it does spark that curiosity and that propels us forward.
Yeah. It's like learning music at a young age and you realize, oh, I can pick up a guitar. I can pick up a saxophone. I can learn jazz. I can learn rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's endless. And that, I love things like that. And I think it's so important for a human being to understand that there's so much more we don't know than what we do know. And I part of me feels like I was born in 78. And so I went through the public school system and through the 80s and the 90s. And I just had this sense like there was this underlying narrative that we knew everything. And that made school and learning a little bit dull, actually. And then as I got older and I found these kind of topics that were on the fringe, I started learning way more and I was hungry and interested in physics and mathematics. I thought all of these things were exciting. Whereas if it had been packaged a little bit differently coming up through the schooling years, you probably have students so excited to learn and to understand what's really going on.
Years
Yeah.
ago, I did classes in elementary schools,
Mm,
usually with third graders. And we would bring all the third grade classes together. And I'd show them the pictures of the UFOs, ask them what they thought. Time went by so fast because they all had brilliant questions.
mm,
And it wasn't a, oh, I saw that or anything like that. It was a question. How did they get here? How long does it take? What do they look like? What do
mm,
they want?
mm,
All of these things from third graders. So we started doing experiments, and the teachers would give the kids a quiz prior to me coming in. And then 3 days after I was in talking to them.
mm,
And the kids' curiosity just made them soar. Their math
mm,
scores started coming up, their
mm,
history scores, English, everything. It was really a lot of fun. And it was just done because one teacher wanted to know how they would react to their potential future,
mhm,
which is maybe in the stars. And that was the whole point for having me come in and talk to the class. And it was
mhm.
really not me talking. I just opened it up and they had questions. The pictures sparked the questions. Amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. And it makes sense. You could even take that a bit further when you're an adult and maybe you're getting in with a company that's at the ground level, but it's exciting technology and you're going to be part of building something new. It's all in the same vein because you're still learning and it's exciting new territory. That mystery of the unknown, but knowing that you've got something there. I think it's what pushes us. It's a major motivating factor. Wait, yeah, I had a question about disclosure there a second ago. Okay, so this is an impossible question, but I just want to get your thoughts on it. There's different narratives that are pushed throughout UFO groups, social media, and even sometimes in the mainstream. They pose questions that then direct the narrative. Is it's the good bad topic? Are they good? Are they bad? It's so I have a couple different thoughts on this, and I'd love to get your feedback. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so I feel if there's bad entities out there and they're up to no good and they're just poking us here and there, is it possible that's just misunderstood? And then I also heard that there's nothing but good ones out there. And both of those seem to, I don't know if I agree with either one of those. I just feel like if there is intelligence, non human intelligence engaging with the planet, they would have different motivations. Some would just say, hey, we want to observe. Some might say that we want to maybe exploit something. I know that's impossible to answer, but what are your thoughts on the good, bad part of it?
Yeah, I think there is good and bad out there. I think a lot of it is perception. I do think a lot of it is misunderstood. I think there's good and bad through everything, which is a
Mm,
process of development and learning. And
mm,
so it's not an extreme thought.
mm,
But when someone approaches a craft from curiosity
mm,
and are taken aboard, is
mm,
that an abduction or is that a contact?
mm,
They initiated the contact. They
mm,
walked towards the craft.
mm,
They were curious. They were thinking about it.
mm.
Is it a contact or an abduction? So
Yeah,
that's
and
a
you're,
misunderstanding, I think, in
mm,
a lot of cases. Many cases, no. Abductions do happen, but I think
mm,
many people initiate that agreement, walk forward, and oh, here I am. Who are you?
The Travis Walton case is an excellent example of that. If you believe the Travis Walton case and it's well documented, that's something definitely happened there, in my opinion. That's the case where he'll say the same thing. He'll say he thinks it was an accident and that maybe he was taken to help, though. Yeah,
This was happening about the same time as the Meier case. And I remember that was back in the 70s. Poor guy. Travis is in Arizona, and I am too. And he suffered so much from the press and from the UFO groups. Because why did you do that? What was the purpose of that? It was really sad to see what he went through. But it was a different time. Had that happened now, had he had that information now, it would have been received very differently.
And we have so much more information now. Like we've got FLIR footage that's been released to the public. You have high-level intelligence officers coming forward and saying these incredible things that, and they get backlash for saying these things. Obviously it feels like this is picking up speed and that disclosure is happening. I don't see a day when the president comes up on the radio or TV and says anything official, but I just see that this just gaining steam. Do you see a reason for that? Or is this a natural thing that's happening? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the timing of it is necessary because we are looking at the universe and our part in it. I think we have to do that. I don't think the president whoever president is out there, will ever say, oh, this is real or that isn't. It's like the scientists that analyzed our material. They're going to say, we can't tell you what it is, but something's there. The government's already doing that. I don't want to put all of my faith in the government telling me what to believe. I just am not that person. I'd rather do my own research. I'd rather learn for myself. Every case is different. But we are getting to a point where we need to take all of that information in, whether you're a researcher or a John Doe public, just mildly curious about any of this. It's too important to ignore because we are going to be in space and we are going to walk it back and have to deal with each other here. When we do that, then we can get out there. One of the things you mentioned, the FLIR footage that the Navy's come out with and everything. We had FLIR footage from Mexico pilots that were part of their DEA. This was back in 1995.
When you say we, do you mean you and Lee?
Lee and I were working with Jaime Maussan in Mexico, and we interviewed these people, military pilots. They had FLIR footage back in the 90s. Never was it even discussed up here, which is really sad. There's so much going on all over the world. We have a tendency to look at it as a little U.S. bubble. The United States and Canada maybe, and maybe a European country every now and then, and we put them in a bubble and we say, oh, it happens here. It doesn't. It happens all over the world. And that takes on a whole different concept. There are different groups visiting different places. And fortunately, I have been able to travel into some of these places. I've been in jungles in South America and talked to indigenous people that say, oh, yeah, there are Star Brothers. They talk to our minds all the time. And it is perfectly normal for them. I've been in Europe and talked to air traffic controllers that have seen these things, in Mexico City, where they've seen these things flying right underneath passenger aircraft. So all of this, it's out there. We just need to be able to access the information to learn from it. But we don't need anybody to tell us it is or it isn't. That's up to each one of us to figure out.
That's amazing. Brit, that's probably a great way to wrap this up. I think that's an excellent message. Love for you to tell people how they can find you, how they can find your book, and what you're up to.
Okay. You can follow what I'm doing at britelders.com, BRIT Elders. I'm on Facebook. You can email me through there. You can find the book at bookstores, Amazon online sellers, as well as bricks and mortar people, and the documentary film that has just come out. Same name, UFO Contact from the Pleiades, the documentary film. It's available both in DVD and streaming. Yeah, that's something if you want to learn about this case and really set your curiosity into motion, it's a good way to do it.
And I'll put a link for your website in the description below. And I would highly recommend everybody watch the documentary. It's excellent. The book is excellent. I did have another question for you. I saw years ago, I think it was on the Today Show, and I didn't realize that you were friends with Shirley MacLaine, but she was on national television talking about these topics and how she had even seen something. I think the entire movie crew and actors saw it in Malta, maybe. Could you talk about her involvement? Where was it?
It was in Peru.
It was in
filming
Peru.
Out on a limb in Peru. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
Shirley
is
and
her
I,
involvement in this?
we're best friends. We didn't start
Mhm.
out that way. When we first came out with the book, she called and my husband answered the phone and she says, I want to go meet this Mr. Meier. And Lee said, I don't care who you are. I'm not running tours. And he hung
Right.
up the phone. So she waited a few hours and she called back and she says, no, seriously, I'm writing a book called Out on a Limb. And I think he can contribute some information. So we talked about it. We just come back from 6 weeks in Switzerland and we decided, okay, we'll go back. So we took her and we spent a week over there with Billy. Shirley's an amazing woman. She's one of the brightest, most curious individuals you will ever meet in your life. She had a tape recorder in Billy's face for 5 days solid. She is a question machine, one after another. Billy was so gracious, and we'd sit around the table and she'd shove the little recorder in front of him and we'd eat and talk and she would question and Billy would answer. It was really something. And so she got her time with Billy. She came back, she wrote Out on a Limb. She made the character David a composite of 3 different contactees she had met. Billy was one of them. The piece in Out on a Limb where she's driving and the guy is actually driving and there's no headlights and it's at night and it's dark. That actually happened to the 3 of us with Billy. He was driving a Jeep. Now, mind you, Billy has one arm, okay? And he's driving a Jeep. He's holding the steering wheel with his knee, shifting with his arm. No headlights through the forest. We were going to go bowling that night, the 4 of us.
Oh my gosh.
Insane. And he just said, don't worry, they're telling me how to get there. It's okay.
Wow.
We got there, but that was something that was quite an experience that we all had with Billy. And it
Oh
was
my gosh.
unbelievable. I mean, you didn't know whether to just relax with it or be scared to death.
Yeah. That's unbelievable. I always found that story interesting that she said that, I think, on the Today Show. And I was like, whoa, who is this? Why is she saying this? And then I think I found that online years after it actually taken place. I always found that interesting when little nuggets of information like that popped out onto the mainstream back in the mid 2000s, back when this was not talked about at all. It seemed like that all changed in 2017 with the New York Times article. It seemed like that almost gave people permission to talk about it openly.
Yeah.
Which was a big deal.
Which is why I keep saying we don't need permission from the government or anybody else, the media, to be curious. We really need to do that. Curiosity for ourselves. Yeah.
But I think what a lot of people were doing is they were being curious quietly. And it was almost like this club that everybody was a part of that nobody knew who the other members were because you didn't want to tell everybody that you were part of the club.
That's a great way to put it.
And because, you didn't want to be ridiculed, which was a real thing. But it's after that came out, I was like, oh, this was in the New York Times. Let's talk about this article. And so it felt, very interesting. Brit, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. You've been very gracious. I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, I have to. You are a wonderful host. It's a great discussion. I love the back and forth and thoughts
Yeah.
and ideas. That's going to propel us into the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. This has been a fascinating conversation, Britt. If you wouldn't mind just hanging on a second, I'll end this up here and I'll talk to you for a second. Goodbye, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you're finding any value, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, and leave a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the show.